Peer Talk, a dialogue with business owners just like you. Peer Talk conversations run the gamut of business challenges facing owners today. The host of Peer Talk is Dan Crowley, founder and owner of Peer Executive Groups, which provides a safe space for owners to share their experience, grow their businesses, and learn from their peers.
Okay, welcome to Peer Talk. There are a number of great business owners out there, just like yourself, who would love to share their experiences with you, and we hope to give them a voice. Today's guest is Glenn Leppo in part 2 of a 2-part series with him. He is the president and CEO of Leppo Equipment and Leppo Rents in Ohio, as well as many other states in the nation. For a full curriculum vitae, please check out podcast 1. Plenty of information there on the background of Glenn. Today, Glenn unpacks the role of the president versus the role of the owner and other people strategy issues. Enjoy today's session. With that, I'd like to segue into our last topic, which really has to do with the people strategy of Leppo. You've now documented your vision. You have a feel for where you're going. You may take that vision and say, and by the way, this is what we're going to look like 10 years from now. But ultimately, to know that you're proceeding the right way with that, you're going to have to measure. And, tying that back to your people, I wanted you to kind of unpack the role of a president versus the role of an owner. I think that can be very confusing for our members, and it's hard to, wear different hats at different times. And also when they want to start to replace themselves. We have some owners who have been in search of a president for probably 15 years. So how do you do that? How does Leppo handle, the breakdown on roles and having the right people in the right places?
I got lucky to some degree. Actually, ironically, one of our peer group members from the what now is called Premier got a resume from somebody who was looking for a job in Chicago, but happened to live in my backyard. He'd been let go from a previous employer during the downturn and in their business, and Terry was the guy in Chicago who sent me this guy's resume. His name's John, and said, "This guy's got way too much horsepower for us, but maybe you need him." And so had a lot of conversations with John. He came on board, and my plan from the get-go was for him to become the person who ran the business on a day-to-day basis, whatever title you want to put that on. We called it president. He's now COO, has some presidents reporting to him, but that's all just structural title stuff. The reality is he's the person who runs the business on a day-to-day basis. And but it took 5, 6, 7 years for him to get to that point. I mean, he's a Naval Academy grad. He's a bright, brilliant guy. He's all those kinds of things, but he needed to understand our core values. He needed to understand how we do business. He needed to understand the industry because he came from Granger and a uniform rental outfit. So he had some idea of distribution and rental, but not anything in our industry. So, we spent the time, put him through different positions, all that kind of stuff. But he was clearly the right person. And so he has the same executive coach I did for a long time, and he switched coaches since then. In fact, my whole leadership team has executive coach of some flavor or another that they see.
Wow, that's
yeah, it's probably a little unique.
Yeah.
But it helps them work through issues. So anyhow, you really need to find a person and be willing to, it's going to take you 5 years, to me anyhow, to develop somebody to be able to take that role. Of you trust them enough that they're going to do the right thing for the business on a day-to-day basis, and then you have to let them go. And you have to not you need to never end run them. Somebody comes to you and you go, well, in my case, I say, well, did you talk to John about that? What's John think? And, it doesn't take very long. You do that half a dozen times, the word gets out. Don't go to Glenn. He's just going to tell you go to John. So go to John. And if John has an issue, John elevates it to me. We have every week what we call same page meeting, and we just talk through whatever he sees, whatever I see, make sure we're on the same page. So
same page meeting. That's fascinating. So does that happen only at the CEO to president level, or I'm sorry, owner to president level, or does it happen at different levels in your company?
That exact meeting is really just in EOS terms, the visionary to what's called the integrator. John is the integrator in EOS. He basically integrates all the operational side. But similar meetings occur. We have everybody in the company, all the leadership team, and just to explain who the leadership team is, it's myself, John. We have three business segments, we call them. One is the Bobcat side of the business, one's access equipment, and then one is the oil and gas. So we have three different segments of the business. So those three are operating presidents. The CFO actually still reports to John. The CTO, the guy who's technology and marketing, reports to John. So those folks report to John. Everybody except John and my assistant, who's also John's assistant and our CFO's assistant. So I have 1 1/3 direct reports. So anyhow, everybody should be having one-on-ones with their people. So our location managers all have one-on-ones with their boss, who's generally the segment president. So we believe in one-on-one meetings on a regular basis, at least monthly.
So staying on the same page obviously is critical. And you're, as an owner, you're very verbal and are able to share that, but not all owners are created equal, right? So not everybody has the ability to kind of verbalize their vision. They need to continue to do that. What about, do you guys use for the role, do they get a job description?
What we really have is what's called an accountability chart, which most people would call an organizational chart. But it really sets it fairly clearly what's your balls, what's yours to handle. And anybody who's a manager, their first role is what's called LMA, lead, manage, and hold accountable the people who work for you. So making it clear that your first job is to be a manager. It's not to run the store. It's not to interact with customers. It's to manage the people who work for you, because even we undervalue management skills as an organization. We tend to like people who are very technically competent, but the reality is a good manager makes a huge difference.
Do you, so along those lines, I love that LMA, by the way, it's great. So do you prescribe to a specific type of leadership training that you commit to, or is there any kind of commitment to understanding behavioral analysis inside your company, anything like that?
Well, we've really dedicated a lot of time to developing our managers.
Got it.
And so we've worked with a local university, Akron University, and we have courses that we've sent essentially our people. Nobody else is in the course, so I guess they're more or less one-on-one. But we'll send 10, 12 managers to a course on understanding financials was the most recent one. But yeah, they've also had courses in leadership, having crucial conversations, all the things that you need to do to be a good manager. And so it was not without controversy starting on this development of people path. It was tough. My brother struggled with it because we were spending a lot of money and time, weren't seeing a lot of results for a while. It took 2 or 3 years before all the location managers got to the point where we could actually trust them, not in a negative trust standpoint, but to make good decisions that they understood enough of the picture, both from a financial standpoint and gross margin and all the things that they needed to understand, that they were focusing a lot of energy in the wrong places rather than focusing their energy where it needed to be focused. And so it just took time. And it was a lot of money and a lot of time getting there. But now that we're there, we couldn't be where we are without it.
Do you guys one of the things I always wondered about Leppo was, do you prescribe to the think like an owner mindset, or are you more like, we don't really want to have too much of their energy focused erroneously. We want them to really buckle it down into their particular uh, cog in the wheel, so to speak.
I would say there's a fair amount of think like the owner.
Okay.
Not completely, but we try to have, particularly at the leadership team level. I mean, their compensation is structured. When I get a distribution from the company, they get a distribution from the company. When we make a bunch of money and the value of the company grows, they make a bunch of money, and so they get tied into the success. They own part of the real estate along with us. So we've really tried to tie, particularly the leadership team level, and then as you work down through the organization,
Mm-hmm.
the location managers, as they've continued to develop, we try and bring more and more of the ownership thought process into it.
Mm-hmm.
But it really depends on where they are. If you try and get too far ahead, you can get yourself in trouble, because you have to have the whole picture, and if you don't have the whole picture, it can be a little bit of a challenge. So you really need to see where your people are, meet them where they are, and then just continually kind of ramp it up a little bit, teach them a little more, give them a little more information, share a little more, financial information, whatever it is, give them more opportunities. ARA has a great program on financials, I think, that some of our people have taken. So there's opportunities out there, but you really got to work through that whole process with people.
Got it. Okay. And so, from evaluating performance, it does sound that there is quite a bit of holistic conversation and maybe more of a coaching perspective than a hardball evaluation of performance, right? Something more along the lines of subjective type of conversation with those key people. Does that sound right? Or
Yeah, we have what we call quarterly conversations. Everybody should be getting a quarterly, and we're not perfect at this. We're trying to get it down to at least the people who work for the leadership team to have a conversation on a quarterly basis. It's basically just that basic stuff of do you have the four core values, and where do we see you doing great on that, and where maybe you're slipping a little bit. And then there's also associated with the role, being the right person in the right seat. Do you get the job? Do you want the job? Do you have the capacity to do the job? There are the things we need to do to build your capacity, so that you can do a better job. Those things all come into play, and yeah, it's much more of a coaching philosophy than anything else. It's not a rigorous sit down with a 50 checklist. Have you done this, 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 this? But more of a coaching, mentoring process.
got it. Okay. Well, the last part of that really is, for the members, the role of an owner. How do I self score if I'm an owner? I'd be curious to know, your opinion on that. We've had some recent changes inside the peer groups with regard to metrics and conversations that are happening on a quarterly basis, which I look at it almost like it's a KPI scorecard, but I almost feel like it's almost like an owner scorecard. How do you determine if you go in the right direction as a owner?
Well, I really view the owner as having two major pieces. One is the pure financial return. It's not necessarily my scorecard, but it's how I judge, in this case, John. How is the business performing from a financial standpoint? I have my criteria that I expect, and are we doing that? Because that's what ultimately determines how many distributions I can get from a dollar standpoint, and what the value of the company is what's our profitability. And we focus on return on asset. What's our profitability divided by the number of assets we have? Because generating $1 million of profit sounds great. If you have $10 million worth of assets, that's fantastic. But if you have $100 million worth of assets, it's not quite as impressive.
Is that sorry? Is that ROA? Is that based on net assets or original asset costs?
Net assets,
Net assets.
depreciated assets.
Okay, got it.
So it's a little distorted by whatever you use for a depreciation schedule, but as long as you're consistent, the measure stays relatively consistent. So that's our primary financial target is ROA, but the second, I guess in some ways tougher piece is the culture.
Gotcha.
Are we staying within the culture of what we want to do? I think back, had a manager who was doing pretty well on the ROA standpoint. He was running the business. He was running a couple of stores, doing a pretty good job, but he tended to not treat his people like I want him to be treated. Was not the caring as before. I had the care part in there, but it just wasn't part of his way of doing business. And my executive coach said, I know you feel like this person can turn around, but are they worth the investment that it's going to take to get them there?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, he had another opportunity, and we encouraged him to take that opportunity. And we're still friends, get along fine. He's a good person, just not a perfect fit for us. So, really, to me, I hold the Leppo way, and not just because it's my name, but that's my job is to what I call shepherd or be a steward of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the steward who passes it from my brother to whoever's next, which at this point is going to be my son. And my job is to leave it better than when I got it. So, and if he does his job, it'll be better when he hands it off to the next person, whoever that is, than when he got it.
Outstanding. That's great. Well, that actually gives us a good pause here, and I appreciate all your time today. What about what have you been doing? What are you reading? What are you doing to sharpen the saw? Continue to keep yourself as sharp as you can in terms of anything you're reading recently or listening to, or
actually, I'm rereading some classics. 7 Habits from Stephen Covey.
Got it.
That helped me with the personal mission statement. It's something I think most people blow right by in that book, but he recommends having a personal mission statement. Some books are, I'm reading Good to Great again. I'm reading Built to Last again.
Wow. Classics.
Classic books. No Man's Land.
Nice.
I'm starting to reread. So mostly stuff that I've read before, but I just have a different way of looking at it now than I did the first time or second time or whatever I've read it. So I find that when I reread some of those classics, that there's more things in there than I saw the first time. So that's really where I've spent a lot of my time from a reading standpoint. And also, quite honestly, right now, at least for the last few months, it's been keeping up with all the coronavirus and regulatory and PPP and all that kind of stuff. What's going on in the world, and now the racial thing has come into play. Mm-hmm. And we had a little bit of a challenge in one of our stores that down south when we moved in. Another couple businesses were displaced in the process of our moving in because we wanted the whole building, and one of them was had a black business in it. Mm-hmm. And it caused a bit of a stir for us. Mm-hmm. But I actually just called the owner and said, hey, how are you doing? Some people on Facebook were claiming they were put out of business and we didn't care and all this kind of stuff. So wow. I just reached out to the owners and said, okay, you're still in business? Yeah, sure. We're doing fine. This is our new address. And so we put a sign up in the window saying, hey, please go support this business. And this is their new address and this is their phone number. But you got to do that by just reaching across and being a human being.
That's right.
Facebook posts don't get you there.
Dynamite. You're correct. That's excellent. Well, again, we appreciate you being on with us, and hopefully we can have you on for future episodes as you continue to re-look through some of the business classics and as Leppo continues to wind its way up the river. And again, thanks for being on, Glenn. We appreciate you.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Dan.
No problem. Our guest on Peer Talk today has been Glenn Leppo, CEO of Leppo Rents and Leppo Equipment. Tune in each week for more valuable content from your peers. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Peer Talk from Peer Executive Groups, produced and directed by Noah Crowley and hosted by Dan Crowley. Subscribe to this podcast for notifications of future episodes of Peer Talk.